Boulder Dash is an award-winning wooden roller coaster at Lake Compounce. This custom Coasters International coaster has a laundry list of accolades, including top spots on the Amusement Today Golden Ticket Awards several times. It's not hard to see why. This coaster is a relentless barrage of airtime and laterals on the side of a heavily wooded mountainside. Either of these things would be great on their own, but combining them together makes Boulder Dash truly special. That is why I think Boulder Dash is the best roller coaster in all of New England, and I'll discuss the ride's history and changes over the years in this review. Boulder Dash is the park's signature attraction, and it's arguably the ride that saved Lake Compounce back in 2000. In the 1980s and early 1990s, Lake Compounce was struggling. This Bristol, Connecticut amusement park had an antiquated ride lineup with only one adult coaster in the 1927 Wildcat, which was and still is a notoriously rough coaster. But the bigger issue was the lack of stability. Lake Compounce cycled through one operator after another. From 1985 to 1987, the park was actually owned by Hershey Park. Then from 1987, Joseph Entertainment Group owned the park and declared bankruptcy in 1991. This caused Lake Compounce to remain closed for both the 1992 and 1993 seasons. Funtime Parks purchased the park late in 1993, but the following year Funtime merged with Premier Parks, who owned the nearby Riverside Park, which today is known as Six Flags New England, and that park was under an hour away from Lake Compounce. Premier wanted to focus on Riverside, so they put Lake Compounce up for sale. Cedar Fair was interested in buying the park, but was instead purchased by Kennywood in 1996. And Kennywood completely changed the park's reputation, transforming it from a rundown park to a charming family park. They started with some smaller additions, but they added one of the most ambitious coasters ever in 2000 in Boulder Dash. Custom Coasters International, or CCI for short, had designed several acclaimed wood coasters in the mid to late 1990s, such as Holiday World's Raven, Michigan's Adventure's Shivering Timbers, and Knott's Berry Farm's Ghost Rider. CCI was the premier wood coaster manufacturer at the time, thanks to their ability to create out-of-control rides loaded with both airtime and laterals. And these rides were affordably priced too, which made them appealing to small and medium-sized parks, such as Lake Compounce. Boulder Dash cost $6 million, which seems exceedingly low when you consider this coaster has a whopping 4,725 feet, or 1,440 meters of track, and it's also built on a mountain. The Kennywood Corporation was no stranger to unique terrain, which was one of the reasons they were willing to build a coaster in such an ambitious location. Kennywood had two wood coasters diving down a ravine in Jackrabbit and Thunderbolt. Plus, they also had Steel Phantom, which was later converted into Phantom's Revenge. But the inspiration for Boulder Dash actually came from one of their other parks. Idlewild was home to the Rollo Coaster, a small family wood coaster on a heavily wooded hillside. Kennywood dreamed of a larger, more thrilling version of Rollo Coaster, and Lake Compounce was the perfect opportunity. They had the proper terrain, as the entire back edge of the park was on Compounce Mountain. Lake Compounce marketed Boulder Dash as the first mountain coaster. And that's only partially true. Wiegand had already built some of their steel mountain coasters often found at ski resorts, but Boulder Dash was arguably the first conventional coaster built entirely on the side of a mountain. And I'd argue Boulder Dash has the best setting of any coaster. By day, the visuals of carving up and down a hill, whizzing past trees, is surreal. You forget you're in a theme park, and very little of the ride's outward leg is actually visible off-ride. By night, Boulder Dash is a completely different animal. There is zero light along the course. The return run does run alongside a pathway that leads to the park's River Rapids ride, but that section of the park closes by 6 p.m., so it's not illuminated at night. And I know people often cite Beast as the best night ride in the coaster community, but Boulder Dash feels just as isolated and has a much better use of terrain. Plus, it has actual airtime. It can be hard to get a night ride though, because the park usually closes by nightfall, so your only opportunities are the last ride of the night on a summer weekend, or for the park's Halloween event. Boulder Dash was one of the final CCIs built with a completely wooded support structure, and it opened to rave reviews, so it was $6 million well spent. But that's not the final bill for Boulder Dash. CCI was notorious for using cheap building materials to keep their ride costs down, and Boulder Dash was no different. As a result, Lake Compounce has to frequently replace sections of the ride to keep it running well. And Boulder Dash definitely is not as smooth as it was when it opened. Up front, the ride is just as amazing as ever. The sea is incredibly smooth still. However, the ride is considerably bumpier, and it jackhammers rather badly at points towards the back of the train or on a wheel seat. For that reason, and the fact that the airtime is the best up front, I will always wait the extra time for the front row. I've ridden Boulder Dash almost 50 times in the past 3 seasons, and I think all but one of those rides was in the front row. The roughness in the other seats is the biggest issue with Boulder Dash. Most elite rides are awesome in all rows, but Boulder Dash can really beat you up if you ride it in the wrong row or if the ride is running rough. And Boulder Dash hasn't just gotten track work over the years, it has actually gotten reprofiled several times, specifically a stretch of track on the return run. When Boulder Dash originally opened in 2000, the return run features a section of trick track broken up by a dip. And this section of the ride was insane. You were violently whipped to each side of the train while getting an ejector pop in between. However, this section of track aged very poorly. As part of a $3 million retracking project where Great Coasters International replaced roughly 80% of the coaster's track, GCI removed this trick track and replaced it with an extra bunny hill and a triple up. The triple up added 2 powerful ejector pops the ride didn't have before, and they were arguably the ride's most intense airtime moments. And interestingly, the one other coaster where CCI also used trick track in Shivering Timbers also had that section removed for similar reasons to Boulder Dash. Trick track and wood coasters do not go together. While the triple up was incredible for the first few years, it soon became the most violent part of the ride. It just didn't feel like this section was tracking properly. It felt like the train was being slammed brutally into the rails. The airtime was still powerful, but the entire section felt like a car accident between the constant jackhammering and the slamming. Boulder Dash is my fiance's favorite coaster, but even she refused to ride it, even in the front row, after experiencing the triple up in 2016 at Haunted Graveyard. And thankfully that winter, Lake Compounce at Martin and Vlaminx replaced the triple up with a double up. While this element's airtime was far less abrupt, it tracked much more naturally, and it's still riding like a dream to this day. I try to ride Boulder Dash as many times as possible when I visit Lake Compounce, but it's sometimes challenging to get more than just a few rides due to this coaster's wait time. It's not surprising that Boulder Dash is the biggest draw at Lake Compounce. And the park actually owns 2 trains for Boulder Dash. From 2000 to 2007, while the park was owned by the Kennywood Corporation, Lake Compounce would routinely run 2 trains. After Parque Reunidos took over in 2008, 2-train operations was only likely on weekends. Slowly, that turned into only being likely on busy weekends. By 2015, 2-train operation was exceedingly rare. Since then, I think Boulder Dash has successfully operated with 2 trains just a handful of times. The park always starts with 1 train, and only if the ride consistently has a full queue line is when the park will consider adding the 2nd train nowadays. When this happens, the park tends to make an announcement that the ride is closed for a short delay, but they don't always say why. This can cause people to understandably leave the queue line. If too many people leave the line, they will continue running Boulder Dash in 1 train. I've had this scenario happen to me twice. Other times they've tried adding the 2nd train, and it hasn't always worked. The most notable incident occurred in August of 2017. It was a busy weekend day, and the American coaster enthusiasts actually had ERT after park close, so the park tried transferring the 2nd train onto the track. The procedure for Boulder Dash to transfer a train onto the track is to dispatch the 1st train, empty, and park it on the lift hill. But in this fateful day, the park did not stop the green train in the lift. So while they were trying to transfer the blue train onto the track, the green train was making its way through the course. However, Boulder Dash was in manual mode, which disabled the final brakes, so the 2 trains collided. What's even scarier is what would have happened had the transfer track not been lined up with the final break. The results could have been catastrophic. Amazingly, the park salvaged one good train, and they got the ride open a few weeks later. The ride did add a second train again for the following year, but it's just as rare to see them on the track together. The ride has also valleyed the second train several times. The most common time of year when the second train is needed is during the park's Halloween event, specifically on Saturdays. These nights also tend to be some of the coldest days of the park's operating season, with temperatures frequently dropping into the low to mid 40s. Lake Compounce often will send test trains empty, so they've valleyed trains a few times in these conditions. If it happens during morning testing, the park can usually get Boulder Dash open by the end of the day. But when it happens when they try to transfer the second train onto the track later in the day, it usually will cause Boulder Dash to close for the remainder of the day. In 2021, Boulder Dash received an all-new control system, so the hope is that the ride will now regularly run 2 trains. I've heard faults were more common when Boulder Dash ran 2 trains in the past, but the main reason why Boulder Dash often runs just 1 train is to reduce wear on the track. Not only is Boulder Dash an extremely aggressive coaster, but its mountainous location makes it challenging to retrack the ride's first half. And since Boulder Dash has rather slow dispatches and a 3-minute cycle time, the line absolutely crawls most days. It's not uncommon to see this ride with a 45 to 60 minute wait on busy summer weekends or Saturdays during Haunted Graveyard. It's possible to get some rides early in the day before crowds make it back to Boulder Dash. However, the ride usually needs an hour to fully warm up and run in its peak form. On other days, it's much easier to rack up rides in Boulder Dash. As I mentioned earlier, I will always wait for the very front. I don't care if it's several extra trains, and it usually is. The station itself doesn't have much space for people to queue for the front. The reason it may take a few extra trains for the front are the ADA passes coming up the exit. Most riders will understandably pick the front when they're asked which row they want. This isn't different than other parks. The issue with Boulder Dash is that the one-train operations and long cycle time leads to riders up the exit getting the front row quite regularly, sometimes every other train. Boulder Dash runs familiar PTC 2-bench trains. The front row of each car will be significantly smoother because you're not sitting on a wheel. The ride features a standard seatbelt and individual ratcheting lap bar combo. I prefer the restraints on other wood coasters, but they're decent on Boulder Dash. I just recommend holding onto the lap bar after the operators check it because the valleys will cause it to ratchet down a few extra clicks during the ride. Once dispatched, you turn towards the lift. The train sort of stalls momentarily when it engages with the chain, and you actually feel the front car sort of articulate backwards for a second, and then the motor speeds up and carries you up the mountain. It always feels like the chain is struggling. The exact height of Boulder Dash has never been released, but there are 2 stats that emphasize this coaster's terrain use. First is the fact that this coaster has a total elevation change of 145 feet, or 44 meters. Second, the coaster never gets more than 50 feet, or 15 meters above the ground at any point. That is remarkable considering the difference between the ride's highest and lowest points. Atop the lift, you slowly turn to the right. Then you see the track disappear. Boulder Dash kicks things off with a 115-foot or 35-meter tall drop down the mountain, and it feels like you're being pushed over the edge of a cliff in a barrel. This drop feels quite steep because of its placement. CCI first drops are known for giving strong ejector airtime in the back, but that's not the case with Boulder Dash. You just get some weak lift in the back of the train, which is surprising considering how steep the drop appears. But that may be a visual trick because you're surrounded by trees on all sides. You can barely see the bottom of this drop. Where the drop does excel is in the lateral department. You get some strong and sustained laterals on the drop, particularly towards the back of the train because the drop turns to the right and you're whipped over the drop. And the laterals continue on the pullout because you continue to turn right. Boulder Dash's turns have barely any banking, so you're pinned to the side of the train. Plus, the sense of speed is otherworldly. Boulder Dash is a fast ride on its own with a top speed of 60 miles per hour or 97 kilometers per hour, but it feels even faster due to the proximity of the trees. It really feels like Boulder Dash will careen off the track from the lack of banking and speed. The first turn is a small hop over the lift hill that also continues to turn right. Basically, the drop through the element is one giant right turn. Despite the speed, this element doesn't offer much more than weak lift. My theory is that you're pinned so hard to the side of the train that the coaster physically cannot lift you out of the seat, despite how fast you're going over this bunny hill. You then climb up the mountain and perform a U-turn. And since this turn is barely banked, you are thrown to the other side of the train for another dose of laterals. You then fly back down the mountain and round another turn. This one has some banking, but it's still underbanked compared to the speed at which you take it, so you're thrown to the left side of the train again. You then rise back up the mountain and disappear from sight. The top of this hill delivers a really nice pop of airtime up front, but towards the back, the airtime pop is considerably weaker. Up next is the small hill that twists to the left, and this is the gauge for how fast Boulder Dash is running. If it's running fast, this hill will lift riders out of their seat, but no matter how fast Boulder Dash is running, everyone will get plastered to the side of the train for even more laterals. And the descent is actually a double down. The second part delivers some really nice floater airtime for those towards the back of the train. Up next is a sizable camelback over a boulder. This is another hill that is a gauge how fast Boulder Dash is running. Front row riders get weak but sustained floater airtime if the ride is running at its peak. Back row riders will get floater airtime regardless of how Boulder Dash is running. The bottom of this drop subtly turns to the right, so riders get another jolt of laterals. Then comes the ride's two most intense airtime moments. You rise up the shallow hill with a super tight crest, so everyone gets ejected out of their seat. It's a brief but powerful airtime moment, and right as you return to your seat, Boulder Dash again turns slightly to the right, delivering another burst of laterals, before traveling over another hill profiled similarly to the prior one, so you get, you guessed it, another ejector airtime pop. These hills do tend to be some of the roughest spots in the ride if you're towards the back of the train or in a wheel seat. The second of these hills has another slight turn to the right that delivers another quick instance of laterals before sending a double up. The first part of this double up delivers floater airtime up front, but very minimal airtime in the back. The second part offers no airtime. In fact, it's the slowest part of the ride, and this is the spot where Boulder Dash is most likely to valley. But don't worry, the coaster will rapidly regain all its speed. You perform a 180-degree turn, kicking off the return leg. And this drop is minimally banked, and it's drawn out too, so it continuously builds up speed and sustains laterals the whole way down. At the end of the element, it feels like you're traveling ridiculously fast, as you're now at the ride's lowest point. Keep in mind the first half of the ride took place well up the mountain. Now you're running alongside a pathway at ground level. The return run is a sea of bunny hills. Every row gets airtime, but it is a little bit stronger up front. The first return hill has weak and sustained floater airtime. The following hill delivers airtime that's just as sustained, but this floater airtime is a little bit stronger. The third hill mixes things up. It starts with weak sustained floater airtime, but the hill subtly banks to the left at the apex, which throws riders to the side. The laterals are stronger in the back, but up front you get this neat airtime moment. The laterals occur while you're already levitating out of your seat, so you get thrown to the side and lifted up even higher out of your seat. That's followed by two more speedy bunny hills that deliver good floater airtime throughout the whole train. Then comes the double up. The first part delivers good floater for all rows. The second part only delivers good floater airtime for those towards the front of the train. Boulder Dash then travels down a small shallow dip and crests the ride's final drop, which catches you off guard after that tiny dip. It's reminiscent of the finale in Apollo's Chariot. Front row riders get a weak pop of airtime cresting the final drop, but back row riders get no airtime on the final drop due to how shallow it is. You then rise up into the brake run, getting no airtime unfortunately, and then you hit the brake run. And this is your first chance to breathe after this relentless layout. Boulder Dash's pacing is incredible. Almost every single hill delivers laterals or airtime, sometimes together. It really is remarkable how much laterals Boulder Dash includes, considering this is an out and back coaster. But CCI kept almost every turn unbanked and added subtle transitions after several airtime hills. That keeps riders on their toes and prevents any dead spots. And the wooded setting really heightens the sense of speed, so this coaster is a blitz of elements. Now, one criticism I could see some people having about Boulder Dash is the strength of the airtime. Beyond the 2 ejector pops in the outward leg, the airtime is mostly weak to good floater. Now that doesn't bother me because the floater moments are usually sustained or paired with laterals, but it needs to be said. So what would I rate Boulder Dash? In the front row, this coaster is incredible and worthy of a perfect 10 out of 10, especially if you get the opportunity to ride it at night. Front row rides on Boulder Dash are among the best experiences in the coaster community. However, because this ride suffers in the rows behind it, I'm actually going to give this coaster an overall score of a 9 out of 10. The pacing and laterals are great in every row, but the airtime does weaken a bit towards the back of the train, but more importantly, the ride gets quite shaky. I strongly recommend waiting however much longer you need to in order to get the front row. It's worth it. That is why I think Boulder Dash is the best coaster in New England, and why this coaster has been hovering around my top 10 coasters for about as long as I've been an enthusiast. Again, the biggest weakness Boulder Dash has compared to the other elite coasters is that this ride tends to only be elite in one row, with that being the front. So those are my thoughts on Boulder Dash, the incredible wooden coaster at Lake Compounce, built on the side of a mountain. Have you ridden Boulder Dash? What are your thoughts on the CCI? And do you agree it's one of the world's best night rides? I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, I'd appreciate it if you gave this video a like and you considered subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.